Sandman Volume 10, The Wake, written by Neil Gaiman, art by Michael Zulli, John J. Muth, and Charles Vess. Alright, Volume 10, The Wake. This is the final volume in the main Sandman series. Last volume, Morpheus died, and in this volume we will have his wake and funeral. And the many characters we've met over the entire Sandman series will come and pay their respects to Morpheus in the dreaming. And it is really fun trying to remember who everyone is. So it's a really good final volume. The artwork is top-notch. I think it is a good send-off for the Dream King. Now, this will be the end of my Sandman coverage on my channel. There is some more side books and peripheral books. There's Endless Nights, there's Dream Hunters, there's Overture, which is kind of like a prequel. There's also Death. She has some mini-series. Lucifer, he's got an entire series that spans 75 issues, which is just the length of Sandman itself. So there's so much more Sandman out there. But I'm going to be stopping my coverage here. But when the Netflix TV series does eventually come out, I may return to Sandman and cover a few of these peripheral books. Now, what am I going to be covering next? I'm going to be jumping to a whole bunch of different books, just doing a whole bunch of one-off videos for a while before I get sucked into a brand new series. The first thing I'm going to try and cover is wrapping up American Vampire. American Vampire 1976, the final issue is coming out in the beginning of August, so I will try and get to that. Also, I'm going to be taking a vacation for about a week, so no video next week, but in 2 weeks, I will be back with American Vampire. Alright, let's dive into it though. The final volume of Sandman, the main series, The Wake. Issue 70, The Wake, Part 1, which occurs in wake of what has gone before. A messenger is sent out to all the members of the Endless, informing them that Morpheus has died. The members of the Endless, Delirium, Destiny, Death, Despair, and Desire, all meet and come together. They travel to the Necropolis Litherage, the city situated on another plane of existence. That's entire reason for being seems to surround funeral rites. We saw Necropolis Litherage in Volume 8, World's End. The Endless are here to make arrangements for Morpheus's funeral. They require a ceremonial cloth for Morpheus that is apparently buried beneath the city in the catacombs. The Endless can't travel in the catacombs themselves. The catacombs are constantly shifting and changing, and there's no way to map it. In the World's End story, we did learn a little bit about how complicated and difficult it can be to navigate the catacombs. So the Endless, together out of mud, build an envoy, which is kind of like a humanoid-type being, and Death, she breathes life into him, and Delirium gives him the random name of Eblis O'Shaughnessy. They send Eblis into the catacombs, and there Eblis meets the booming voice, whom we also saw in World's End. Eblis tells the booming voice that Morpheus, the Dream King, has died. The booming voice then directs Eblis to the cloth for the ceremony. Eblis, he takes the cloth and makes his way to the exit of the catacombs. Elsewhere in the dreaming, we see Daniel Hall is now the new Dream of the Endless. He looks a lot like Morpheus, except with white hair, and he wears white clothing. Daniel is in many ways a kinder, more forgiving, gentler version of Morpheus. Cain, he asks for a meeting with Daniel. He insists angrily that Daniel recreate his brother Abel, whom died in Volume 9, The Kindly Ones. Cain says that it's in his contract that he signed with the previous Dream King that him and his brother are a doubles act. It's Cain and Abel. Daniel tells Cain that he does not take well to threats. But to Daniel, he happily remakes Abel, and Abel comes back to life and is reunited with his brother. Matthew the Raven is talking with Eve in her cave. Matthew, he kind of represents us, the reader, and our natural inclination to not accept this Daniel Hall as the new Sandman, the new dream. Matthew is upset and mourning and pouting, and when Eve tells Matthew, "Lord Dream of the Endless sent a message to me for you," and Matthew responds dismissively, "Him? I'm not his raven. He isn't the boss. He can't give me orders." And Eve tells Matthew, "He didn't send you an order, he sent you a message. He says to tell you the funeral is tomorrow and the wake is tonight." Matthew tells Eve to go away. Elsewhere in the dreaming, Daniel Hall rebuilds others that died in the dreaming. Daniel, he rebuilds Mervyn Pumpkinhead by hand and brings him back to life. When Mervyn is alive again, the first thing he says is, "So, what the hell do you think you're looking at?" Daniel then attempts to bring Fiddler's Green back to life. Fiddler's Green, as a ghost, tells Daniel that he doesn't want to be brought back to life. He says, "If you bring me back to life, my death will have had no meaning. I had a fine existence. I was a good place. I spent a little time walking the waking world. I even fell in love once, a little. I declined the offer." Daniel tells him, very well, he may go. Elsewhere around the world, many people are falling asleep and they dream, and by doing this they will be able to attend Morpheus's wake and funeral in the dreaming. Nuala, now having left Fairy, she dreams. Rose Walker, she also dreams. Richard Maddock, the writer who abused Calliope in Volume 3, he dreams. Lita Hall, she dreams. Alex Burgess, awake finally after 5 years. He wishes he could stay awake forever, but even he falls asleep and dreams. Hob Gadling, he also dreams. Queen Titania of the Fairy People, she rides for the nearest portal to the dreaming. She too will be attending the funeral. The angels Duma and Remiel prepare to attend the funeral as well, as does Lady Bast, the cat goddess. They all slowly start arriving in the dreaming for the ceremony. Hob Gadling, he is particularly upset. The centaur from the World's End Inn comforts him. Issue 71, The Wake, Part 2, in which a wake is held. Daniel Hall in his tower is talking with Lucian, watching all the many guests coming to attend Morpheus's wake. Lucian tells Daniel that, according to the book of the ceremony, Daniel cannot attend the wake. The family may not greet nor formally recognize Daniel until the funeral matters are over and done with. Lucian, he leaves Daniel to go attend the ceremony. And Lucian has a very telling conversation with Eblis O'Shaughnessy, where they discuss the ever-constant presence of the Endless and how they can never really die, they just become something else. Eblis asks Lucian, "Sir Librarian, the young Lord in White, who was he?" And Lucian answers, "He is Dream of the Endless." And Eblis asks, "He is? But the wake, the ceremony, I was told that Dream of the Endless was no more." And Lucian answers, "Yes." And Eblis asks, "So who died then?" And Cain interrupts, "Nobody died. How can you kill an idea? How can you kill the personification of an action?" Eblis continues asking, "Then what died? Who are you mourning?" And Abel chimes in, "A point of view. A point of view is what died." Cain, angry with his brother for spilling another secret, says, "Secret! You told another secret!" Cain, he lifts a rock, and he's going to bash Abel's head in and kill his brother as he often does. He says, "You witless, jelly-bellied, gosset-sniffing dunce! I oughta. But then Lucian stops Cain and tells him, "Cain, not today." And he doesn't kill his brother, and they continue walking on. Calliope gives a little eulogy. She talks about how gallant a lover Morpheus was, and how he knew many things and was so gentle. She then talks about their son Orpheus and the difficulties that brought. She ends by saying, "I am not here to mourn him. I mourned my love a long time ago. I am here to say goodbye to a stranger who once did me a good turn, and to the man who gave my son the death he craved." Matthew, he goes to the wake, but it upsets him. He sees Mervyn Pumpkinhead back alive and wonders why isn't he still dead? And he says that's not Mervyn. And Mervyn, he's just getting drunk and having a good time. Matthew, he flies away and talks with Daniel a bit in his chambers. Matthew, he still doesn't accept Daniel as the new Dream. Daniel tells Matthew that being Dream is all new to him, and tomorrow he will have to meet his brothers and sisters for the first time, and he is afraid of that. Back at the wake, we see Mad Hetty. We see Nuala talking to her brother Chloricon. Chloricon is then talking to his nemesis. Chloricon asks his nemesis if the nemesis will try and destroy him here. His nemesis says, "Oh no, not here, not at a wake. Where would be the manners in me if I tried such a thing? But one day in the wide world betweens, you'll come for him." We see Queen Titania, Thessaly, and Calliope all together, all previous lovers of Morpheus. Titania's romantic relationship with Morpheus was never really explicitly stated earlier, but we can infer that they had one. Titania, when asked about her association with Morpheus, she answers, "My association with the Lord Shaper? That is none of your affair. I am the Queen of Fairy. I keep my own counsel. And as for my memories of the Lord Shaper, I have no desire to share them with any other individual. They are my memories after all. And no more to be shared than I imagine the Lord Shaper's memories of me would have been were he alive, were I dead." Daniel and Matthew talk some more. Daniel tells Matthew that he saved his life when the Corinthian tried to kill him last volume. He did not wish Matthew to die, so he changed the Corinthian's mind. Matthew says, "That's bullshit. You were just a baby." Daniel explains that he had power even then. He says, "I tell you true, I saved your life. Would you prefer I let you die?" Matthew answers, "Maybe." He asks if he can be sent on, if he can go to the place that ravens go when they've had enough. Daniel tells Matthew to come to him after the ceremonies tomorrow, and if he still wishes to pass on and end his life as a raven, then it shall occur. Matthew, he flies away. He talks with the gatekeepers. There is a new griffin at the gate. Daniel didn't recreate it. This griffin is a new griffin that won a contest of strength among all these other griffins, and by winning the contest, he won the honor of being the new gatekeeper of Dream's Dream Castle. Back at the ceremony, Rose Walker with her brother Jed Walker talk with Lita Hall. Rose Walker reveals that she is pregnant. It is most likely that Jack Holdaway we met last volume. Lita Hall darkly says, "Kill it, Rose Walker. Kill it now, before it breaks your heart." She says this about Rose's unborn child. Rose and Jed walk away. They know that Lita Hall is just having a bad time with her son Daniel being this new figure. Jed tells Rose, "Weird, she and her old man used to live in my head." Which is an amusing callback to Volume 2, when Lita Hall and her husband Hector Hall used to live in Jed Walker's dreams in his mind. Matthew, he returns to the festivities. He talks with Eve and Lucian. Lucian introduces Matthew to his old friend, Bahatari Raja, who was the old Indian king who ate the fruit that gave him eternal life that we met in Volume 8, World's End. Well, him and Lucian apparently go way back. Thessaly describes her love story with Morpheus. She says that they met in Barbie's dream world, and months later, she dreamed of him. She did not mean to, but she found herself talking to Morpheus in his realm, and they had a conversation that stretched on many weeks, and Morpheus offered Thessaly a stay in the dreaming. And Morpheus, he quickly became hopelessly in love with Thessaly, and Thessaly thought she loved him, though she did not truly feel likewise and realized it when Morpheus stopped courting her and resumed his work. Thessaly, she left Morpheus, who did not attempt to convince her to stay, and she swore that she would never shed another tear for him again. But right now, she can't help it, and she does so, and she cries a little bit. We see DC superhero characters, Superman as Clark Kent, Batman and Martian Manhunter at the ceremony, and they are talking amongst themselves. Superman says, "Have you ever had the dream where you're an actor on a strange TV version of your life?" And Batman answers, "Doesn't everyone?" And Martian Manhunter says, "I don't." This is in reference to both Superman and Batman having cheesy live-action TV shows in the past. Well, Martian Manhunter did not get his own TV show. We also see other DC characters, John Constantine, the Phantom Stranger, and Dr. Occult, and they are all talking, and John tells them, "Nice trench coat," the joke being they all wear a trench coat. Matthew, he flies and he talks with the various Endless members. Death is wearing red. She says she didn't want to wear black today to this. Destiny asks Matthew to say a few words later about Morpheus if he can, and Matthew, he agrees to do so. Matthew talks with Barnabas a bit, and then they begin to head over to the funeral now as the wake has ended. Matthew says, "There's gonna be a few billion people here today. We better get in early if we want to get a good seat." Issue 72, The Wake Part 3, In Which We Wake. The wake is over, now it is time for the funeral. They place the cerement cloth over Morpheus's body and the ceremony begins. Destiny speaks to the crowd and he reads from his book, which contains the speech that he is giving. It was perhaps always written in this book. He speaks of his brother performing his tasks to the best of his abilities. Lady Bast, she says some words. She says that her and Morpheus respected each other. The two of them were never lovers, and she regrets not telling him that he made her happy when she was in his company, and that the world was a better place for having him in it. Sitting beside Jed Walker and Rose Walker is the DC villain Darkseid, which is kind of hilarious. There's also Emperor Norton, the Emperor of America, from Volume 6. Desire's speech about Morpheus is about how they are family and were forced to interact with each other, and both of their lives would have been much richer if they had nothing to do with each other. It was unfortunate that they were siblings. Despair's speech, she says that she cared for Morpheus deeply. He was wise and so certain of the rightness of his actions. He was a creature of hope. For dreams are hope, or echoes of hope. However, she was a creature of despair. Wesley Dodds, the original Golden Age Sandman, says a few words. He says how all things in his life that have made it worth living have been as a result of his connection to Morpheus, the Dream King. Delirium says of her brother, "He was my big brother. He really was. I was always a bit scared of him, but I'm not scared of him anymore. I'm a bit sad of him instead." Okay, that's all. Elsewhere, Daniel, who is not allowed to attend the ceremony, is by his castle talking to the gatekeepers when a mysterious visitor comes by. The visitor is Destruction. Daniel doesn't know who he is at first, but Daniel offers him hospitality. And Destruction says he was just passing through, but he would love some food and wine. Daniel leads Destruction into the kitchen and they eat a bit. Finally, Daniel starts to recognize Destruction as his brother. Destruction and Daniel walk through the castle a bit, and Destruction tells Daniel that he could leave all this if he wanted, and it will carry on without him. He could walk in the stars with him. Daniel says he does not wish to leave. Destruction tells Daniel to not stress meeting the others, the rest of the Endless. It won't be as bad as he fears. Daniel asks Destruction if he will ever meet him again, and Destruction answers, "Oh, I wouldn't be surprised at all." And Destruction leaves. We see Lucifer and Mazikeen watching the ceremony. And Matthew finally gives his speech. He kind of rambles through various thoughts, but eventually he ends by saying that Morpheus was the most important person in the world to him, and he's gone, and the kid Daniel, he's a good kid, but he's gone too. But you can't kill dreams, not really. What's in my heart? A lot of sorrow, a little regret, and the memory of the coolest, strangest, most infuriating boss, friend, boss I ever had. That's what. Others say some words, too. Lee May, the alderman who turned into a bear, he says some words. Among the crowd of people mourning, we see what is supposed to be Neil Gaiman in the glasses here, and the guy beside him is supposed to be the artist of this issue, Michael Zulli. We also see Odin of Asgard, shivering Jemmy. She was the manifestation of chaos. Pharamond, the travel agent. Alienora, another one of Morpheus's past loves. She was the one that we saw in Barbie's dream world. It was actually her world initially. Morpheus's body is then placed on a black swan boat and is sent down a river. And Death gives the final speech, and her words make sense of everything. She gives everyone peace and meaning, and she bids her brother goodbye. We see Odin, Anubis, and Lady Bast, Lord Kildarkin, the manifestation of order. We see Thor. We see... Do you all remember who this is? Think on it before I tell you who this is. See if you can come up with the answer of who this person may be. Alright. It is Nada, Morpheus's past lover. Remember, she was reincarnated into the body of an infant in Hong Kong. Well, this is Nada here. I love how it's a pretty big Easter egg to see Nada again, but the book doesn't hold your hand or tell you at all that it is her. We, the reader, have to just know it's her based on the past issues. We see Orpheus watching his father getting swept away, and the swan boat that is carrying Morpheus disappears into the sky. And that is the end of the ceremony. It is time for most of the people here to go back to the waking world, and the rest to return to the castle and meet the new Dream of the Endless Daniel Hall. Oh shoot, before I move on, there's Dr. Destiny. Almost missed pointing him out. In the castle, Daniel is talking to his mother, Lita Hall, and Lita asks him, Daniel? And Daniel Hall replies, no. What was mortal of Daniel Hall was burned away. What was immortal was transfigured. I am Dream of the Endless. Daniel tells Lita, you fear vengeance, Lita. We are no longer bloodkin, you and I. I am permitted to take life only to protect the dreaming, but I may punish as I desire. And Lita tells Daniel, I only did it for you. And Daniel Hall says, and you lost your son forever. And Lita asks again, Daniel? And Daniel Hall says, no, I'm sorry, not Daniel. Lita asks, are you gonna hurt me then? And Daniel Hall says, the person who was responsible for the death of the first despair will take the rest of eternity to die. Only then will his pain cease. And he had better cause for what he did than you. You sought vengeance, Lita, but that is a road that has no ending. Come to me. And he hugs his mom and says, you may have my mark on you, Lita Hall. No one shall harm you. Put your life together once again and go in peace. So Daniel Hall, unlike Morpheus might do, forgives Lita and sends her on her way in peace to live out the rest of her life. He does not hold a grudge. Matthew, he later arrives and talks with Daniel, or I guess I shouldn't call him Daniel, he should be called just Dream of the Endless now, but whatever, I'm going to refer to him as Daniel. Matthew says he doesn't wish to die anymore, he wishes to live on. He says he came to the realization that the funeral is over, and it is time to get on with our lives, it is time to grow up. Matthew says he will not be Daniel's raven, but he is willing to stick around and work as an advisor to Daniel. And Daniel seems to accept this. Daniel and Matthew walk onward, and Daniel comes across a young-looking Alex Burgess who appears lost in the dreaming. Daniel, not being vengeful against Alex Burgess like Morpheus was, sends him on his way home. And Alex, he wakes up in the waking world and he is with his love, Paul McGuire. Everyone else who is in the dreaming now wakes up, and Daniel enters a room in his castle with the rest of the Endless family there, waiting to eat food, and he joins them. And the text box reads, and then, fighting to stay asleep, wishing it would go on forever, sure that once the dream was over it would never come back, you woke up. And that text is supposed to symbolize to us, the reader, that we, the reader, too, were at Morpheus's wake and funeral, watching the ceremony. and we too woke up, just like everyone else. And that is the end of the main story. The remaining few issues serve as an epilogue of sorts. Issue 73, The Wake, Part 4. An epilogue, Sunday morning. This will be our final Hob Gadling issue, and I really love it. It's great. Hob and his new girlfriend, Gwen, are driving to a Renaissance festival where Gwen works. The Renaissance Festival is one of those places where people pretend it's medieval times. When they arrive, Gwen changes into her outfit, and she kisses Hob, and they walk around the festival. Hob was actually alive during the time period that the festival is trying to pretend it is, and all of the various historical inaccuracies are bothering him. He comments how it wasn't really like this back then. Gwen mentions that she heard from some of the other staff members here that there apparently was some famous guy in history that shared his name. There was a Sir Robert Gadling that worked as a printer. There was another Robert Gadling that worked as a slaver as well. Now Gwen, she is black. She is Hob's first black girlfriend in his long life. And Hob, he used to run slave ships back in the day, hundreds of years ago. And he feels really guilty about that. It's eating him up inside all these years later. Gwen, she doesn't know about Hob's very long life. Hob and her talk about slavery, and Hob discusses how brutal it was. But Gwen, she kind of brushes it off and says that the English outlawed the slave trade. And Hob says to this, yeah, eventually. And when they did, it got even worse. With it being illegal, the prices for slaves went up. So a slaver only needed 1 in 3 voyages to be successful to make a profit. And he could dump the cargo of the slaves the other 2 times if the weather got bad, or if a British man-o'-war ship spotted them. Hob talks about how all the slaves were shackled together, and if they had to be dumped, they would toss one slave on the end of the boat overboard, and that slave would drag the rest of them with him under the sea, because they were all shackled together. Gwen tells Hob, "Baby, you are not responsible for 500 years of cultural imperialism. Anyway, the slaves were all taken slaves by other African tribes." And Hob to this says, "You sound just like me." And Gwen argues, "Don't change the subject, they would have taken those slaves anyway." And Hob argues to this saying, "Not in the quantities that they did. It's all supply and demand. And they wouldn't have been dragged halfway across the world through hell and worse. You can't imagine what it was like in the hold of a slaver, the smell alone and the noises that they would make." And Gwen, not knowing that Hob, was there, says, "Well, I don't see why you think you can imagine it and I can't." And to this Hob says, "Yeah, you got a point there." Gwen jokes with Hob and tells him, "Robbie, I've got to be the first black woman you've dated, haven't I?" And he tells her that she is. "How could you tell?" And she says, "'Cause if you pulled that shit on a sister before now, she'd have killed you already in self-defense." The two of them, they hug and they move on with their day. Gwen, she has to go to work and work this fair here, but Hob, he's free to wander around and spend a few hours on his own. So Hob, he walks this Renaissance Festival grounds, and he goes to a printer and papermaker shop. Hob, he used to work in printing hundreds of years ago. The guy in the shop talks with Hob, and when Hob tells him that his name is Robert Gadling, the guy in the shop tells Hob, there was a Robert Gadling who was a bookbinder and printer a few hundred years back. He asks Hob if there was any relation, and Hob answers, "Could be." Of course, it was Hob himself. The shop owner shows Hob an antique book that this Robert Gadling made hundreds of years ago, and he shows off how exquisite the craftsmanship was of the book. He says there's nothing like it today. The man says, "Here you go. Each one of these is a genuine Gadling and Company book. I paid the moon and stars for them, but if you're a serious bookbinder, you gotta see how they did it in the old days. Those old fellers, they must have forgotten more about bookbinding and printing than some of us will ever know. And Hob to this says, could be. The man who works at the stall shows Hob a certain book of his. He says, careful now, cost me $150. It's signed to someone, but I can't read the name. Leslie or Lori maybe? And Hob, looking at the signature in the book, he says, Laurel. He recognizes it. The man says to Hob, Laurel, it could be a Laurel at that. Hob gives the man his book back and tells him that he's doing a good job here and he'll see him around. Hob, he continues walking the festival grounds and he wants a drink. He finds a place that sells beer and Hob, he drinks and drinks and drinks. He drinks an unseemly amount, but because of Hob's unique ability to live forever, he doesn't get that drunk. He is a little rude to the waitress a bit. They have a funny exchange. Hob, he goes to the bathroom and then he comes back and he tells the waitress, those toilets are pretty disgusting. And the waitress quips back, well, we strive for realism here. Hob, he eventually walks around and enters an old condemned building on the property. There alone with his thoughts in the condemned building, eventually death joins him and they talk. Hob, he wonders who this woman is in front of him. And Death answers, you were friends with one of my brothers. You used to meet him for a drink once a century? Hob knows who she is now, knows that she is Death. He tells her that he had a dream back in January where he died. It was a true dream then, right? And Death answers, yes. The Morpheus, he did in fact die. Hob continues, so we won't be meeting in 94 years? It's funny, huh? I knew it was true, my dream. I knew it, but hearing it from you. Their conversation then turns to Hob's mortality. Death wants to know if Hob is ready to finally move on and call it a day, call it a life. Hob then has a very sad yet beautiful prophetic interpretation of how he views death. He says, death's a funny thing. I used to think it was a big, sudden thing, like a huge owl that would swoop down and carry you off. I don't know anymore. I think it's a slow thing, like a thief who comes to your house day after day, taking a little thing here and a little thing there, and one day you walk around your house and there's nothing there to keep you, nothing to make you want to stay. And then you lie down and shut up forever. Lots of little deaths until the last big one. And Death to Hob says, it's an idea I've heard before. Hob wonders what comes after death. And Death answers, what do you believe, Hob? Hob, he kind of believes in reincarnation. He asks her if he's right. And Death says, you'll find out when the time comes. Hob asks Death, so is this it? Game over for me? Death answers, maybe. Hob says how much he liked Morpheus, how he was so much older and smarter than him, and how he figured Morpheus would go on long after he was gone himself. Hob comments, there'd be an awful neatness to dying here, wouldn't there? Going on to whatever is one goes on to, like coming full circle. And Death extends her arms and tells Hob, if that is what you want, Hob, if it is, I can give it to you. Just take my hand. Hob, he thinks on it. But he tells Death, I appreciate the offer, I really do, but I don't think so. I'm not ready to die. Not today, not yet, maybe not ever. Anyway, Gwen would kill me if he died. So Death lets Hob live on some more. Hob, he lives. Death leaves for now. Eventually, Gwen finds Hob face down on the table in the condemned building, resting there. Hob wakes up, and the two of them walk on. It starts raining, and Hob, in a good mood, tells Gwen, this is great. And Gwen says, what? The weather. Now this is proper weather, chilly and wet. Most of the olden days happened in the rain. They don't tell you that in the history books. The two hug, and they walk over to some of Gwen's friends. Hob tells her to go talk with them. He's just gonna rest by this tree for a bit. He rests by the tree. An hour or so goes by, and Hob, he fell asleep. And Gwen came by and woke him up, and they began walking to their car to head home. Hob tells her of a dream he had while he was under that tree. And in Hob's dream, he was on a beach, and he was hanging out with Morpheus and Destruction. And he describes Destruction as a pavement artist he met once. This is a reference to Volume 7, where Destruction revealed he worked as a pavement artist for a bit to kill some time. Hob asked Morpheus in the dream, "You're dead, aren't you?" And this is just a dream, and Morpheus nodded. And the three of them all started laughing, and they walked off into the sunset together. Hob tells Gwen, "And then you woke me up." And Gwen asks, "Sweet dream? So what was it?" And Hob asks, "What was what?" And Gwen asks, "The end of the story in the dream." And Hob to this says, "Well, there's only one way to end a story, really." And Gwen replies, "Don't tell me. They all lived happily ever after." And Hob tells her that's the one. He then tells her, "I had a lovely day today, Gwenny. Thanks." And Gwen tells him, "You what?" "I will never understand you, Robbie Gadling. Not if I live to be 1,000. Hob quips to her, "Well, stranger things have happened." And the two of them drive off into the sunset. The very same sunset we saw in the dream on the beach, with Hob, Morpheus, and Destruction. And that is the end of the Hob Gadling story. He will continue on living for now. And now he has this new love, Gwen, in his life, whom he seems incredibly happy with. Issue 74, The Wake Part 5, Exiles. This issue serves as a follow-up to issue 39, Soft Places, which was from Volume 6, Fables and Reflections. In Volume 6, we followed Marco Polo and his journey into the soft places as he got lost there, but eventually Morpheus helped him get his way back to the real world. In this story, a prominent, well-respected Chinese advisor to the Emperor named Master Li was cast out. His son apparently allied with a group called the White Lotus, which dabbled in magic which was forbidden. The son was killed because of it, and Master Li, even though he was respected, he was exiled by the Emperor. Master Li, he was traveling to his place of exile, a village called Wei. While he was making his journey along the way, Master Li accidentally traveled into the soft places. The soft places are places in the world where the border between dreams and reality has eroded or not yet formed. When a traveler accidentally drifts into the soft places, they can be potentially lost there forever. In the soft places, time works differently. It is possible to meet others there from hundreds of years apart. While in the soft places, Master Li meets Morpheus. Morpheus gives Master Li a drink, repaying the favor that Marco Polo paid him in Volume 6, when Marco Polo offered Morpheus some water while he was in the soft places and Morpheus was weak. Master Li and Morpheus talk. Morpheus tells a tale of his son and relates it to Master Li's own son, whom was recently killed. Morpheus's tale goes as such. There was a sage who loved his son as you loved yours. One day the son died, and yet the father shed no tears and made no mourning. When they asked why, he told them, "I did not mourn him before he was born, and I will not mourn him now that he is gone." What do you think of that? Master Li replies, "I think that was foolishness. You mourn, for it is proper to mourn. But your grief serves you. You do not become a slave to grief. You bid the dead farewell and you continue." The Sandman replies, "Indeed," but its advice he apparently couldn't bring himself to follow. Master Li walks on. Master Li eventually runs into Daniel Hall in the soft places, who has now replaced Morpheus as Dream of the Endless. The two of them walk together. While they are walking, the lost travelers on horseback that we met back in issue 39, They have been lost here in the soft places for hundreds or maybe even thousands of years. They've been traveling around trying to find a way out. Well, these travelers meet Daniel, and this is why Daniel has apparently come here to the soft places this day. He comes to let them leave, and he guides them out. Daniel notes, "I have no liking for prisons." Daniel, in learning from Morpheus's experiences, says, "Sometimes I suspect that we build our traps ourselves, then we back into them, pretending amazement all the while." This is in reference to what happened to Morpheus in a way. Daniel continues, "But whether this is the case or no, it is still a worthy thing to open the cages. It is still a virtuous act to free the imprisoned." In the spirit of freeing the imprisoned, Daniel knows that this Master Li is going to go live in exile, and he asks him if instead he would like to come back with him to his castle and be his counselor. Master Li thanks Daniel, but he wishes to go into exile. He has spent his life in obedience to his emperor, and his emperor has exiled him to the village of Wei, and he wishes to do as his emperor commands. Master Li, in a way, is similar to Morpheus in how he honors his commitments and rules that he abides by. Daniel understands, and he bids Master Li farewell and returns him to the waking world outside of the soft places. Master Li then travels on, and we assume he lives out the remainder of his days in exile in that small village. Issue 75, The Wake, Part 6, The Tempest. This is the final issue in the series. This issue serves as a follow-up to A Midsummer Night's Dream. Morpheus, he made a deal with Shakespeare for Shakespeare to write him 2 plays. The first was A Midsummer Night's Dream. That was a play Morpheus wanted Shakespeare to write to honor Morpheus's friends, the people of Faerie. But The Tempest, which was the final play that Shakespeare wrote by himself, that is the play Morpheus wanted written for him personally. Shakespeare, he is composing his play, The Tempest, and we see how various characters in the play are based on experiences in his own life. His daughter Judith may have been an inspiration for the character of Miranda who's in the play, and various other people, events, and passions in Shakespeare's life has been transformed into material for his art, for his play. However, Shakespeare's devotion to his art has slightly strained the relationship between his wife and his daughter. Finally, though, Shakespeare, he finishes the play. He has finished his end of the bargain with Morpheus. He shows Morpheus the play, and Morpheus seems pleased. Before they say goodbye, though, and part ways forever, Shakespeare tells Morpheus, "For a goodly part of my life, I have been in your service. No master would free apprentice without so much as a glass of wine in the master's parlor." Morpheus, he abides by Shakespeare's wish here, and they travel to Morpheus's dream castle in the dreaming where they will share some wine. Shakespeare asks Morpheus what would have happened with his own life if he and Morpheus didn't meet in that inn 20 years ago or so and made their deal. Morpheus gives a guess of what Shakespeare's life would have been like. He says, "What would have happened? You would have written a handful of other plays, in quality no better than, say, The Merry Devil of Edmonton, and then you would have come home to Stratford, you would have taught school, saved a little money, you would have bought a house, let it out and bought another, you would have made your money in bricks and mortar, enough for your family's coat of arms, enough to make them forget your father's setbacks. You would not have been satisfied with your life, and from time to time you would have bored your children with tales of your years in London, your days on the stage." Shakespeare, he remembers his son Hamnet that died many, many years ago, and he asks, "And Hamnet, my boy, would he have lived?" But Shakespeare, he doesn't want to hear the answer. He says, "No, don't tell me that. You've said too much already." Shakespeare, he thinks on his own writing career and how he was so devoted to his stories that he didn't live his own life fully. He says, "I watched my life as if it were happening to someone else. When my son died, I was hurt, but I somehow relish it a little, for now I could write about real death and true loss. Shakespeare says that his wife and him, they sleep in separate beds, and the characters in his stories, they seem more real to him than the people in real life. Shakespeare asks Morpheus about the play The Tempest specifically. He asks why Morpheus didn't want him to write a tragedy for him. Something lofty, dark, a tale of a noble hero with a tragic flaw. And Morpheus answers, I wanted a tale of graceful ends. I wanted a play about a king who drowns his books and breaks his staff and leaves his kingdom. About a magician who becomes a man, and about a man who turns his back on magic. Shakespeare asks, but why? Why this play? And Morpheus answers, because I will never leave my island. And Shakespeare asks, you live on an island? And Morpheus continues, I am in my fashion an island. And Shakespeare asks, but that can change, all men can change, but... And Morpheus continues, I am not a man, and I do not change. I asked you earlier if you saw yourself reflected in your tale. Shakespeare says yes. Morpheus says, well, I do not. I may not. I am Prince of Stories, Will, but I have no story of my own, nor shall I ever. This play, The Tempest, was written for Morpheus. It seems to reflect him in many ways. Although the things he is saying right now to Shakespeare are not true. Although Morpheus likes to think himself as an island, alone to himself, unchanging, solitary, that he will have his own life and no stories of his own, but that's not true. And over the course of the Sandman series, we have seen Morpheus have many of his own stories and change greatly. Morpheus, though, he thanks Shakespeare for the play, and he leaves. And Shakespeare, all that is left now is to write the epilogue. He does so, and that was that. The Tempest was Shakespeare's final play he wrote alone, and he died in 1916. And that is the end of The Sandman. In the Sandman Companion by Hy Bender, he writes of this ending, he says, A Midsummer's Night's Dream was for the fairy folk. This play, The Tempest, was for the Sandman himself. Of course, The Tempest is also about Shakespeare, who never wrote another play by himself after completing it. And in a larger sense, it's about all artists, including Neil Gaiman, who with this tale draws to a close his 2,000-page epic tale of gods, myths, and dreams. Alright, so that was The Wake, the final volume of Sandman. The artwork was top-notch, so detailed, loved it. I really liked the 3 issues that dealt with the wake and funeral. How we had all these characters coming back, seeing them once more, paying their respects to Morpheus. I liked all the Easter eggs, trying to figure out who everyone is. Nada, Darkseid, Superman, Batman, Martian Manhunter. So that was a really good time, a really good send-off for Morpheus, and a really good kind of way to embrace Daniel Hall, the future. So, fabulous issues there. I really liked the 4th issue, the Hob Gadling one. That was great stuff. Hob at this Renaissance fair, being annoyed by the historical inaccuracies. I liked his new girlfriend, Gwen, and seeing Hob kind of being happy. And then Hob and Death having their conversation. Does Hob want to finally hang it up and die after all these many years? But of course, Hob, he wants to keep going. And we kind of get that happy send-off with Hob and Morpheus at the end of that issue. So great, great stuff. If it was me, I would have ended the series right there. The last 2 issues, I'm not that high on, actually. The Soft Places issue with this Master Lee, it wasn't the epicness I wanted to end this series on. It was just kind of this one-off tale dealing with Morpheus and Daniel Hall a little bit. But didn't love that one so much. And the Shakespeare final issue was not too bad, because we are getting some callbacks to A Midsummer's Night's Dream, which was a very important issue for Sandman. And through Shakespeare's work, we are kind of commenting on the overall creative process and writers and Neil Gaiman himself writing Sandman itself, just like Shakespeare writing The Tempest. You can kind of read into a whole bunch of stuff there. So that part was pretty cool. Shakespeare and Morpheus talking and drinking, and Shakespeare talking about his life was pretty cool. So there was some good stuff in that issue. I just really loved the first four issues so much more, and really kind of wanted to end on that note. But still, not too bad. Not too bad. I thought The Wake was a pretty great volume. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all have enjoyed my Sandman coverage, and I will see you all in the future for whatever series comes next.